and I just hit the wall. Hey guys, and welcome back to another video on my channel. Since I've been going through life, I'm just gonna say that's all, I've been going through life, I have been filming like back to back to back. This week I have filmed 3 videos for the next 3 weeks. So I'm really sitting here contemplating if I'm going to be uploading more than 1 video a week. So I'm not sure if this is going to be going up on a Monday or if this is going to be going up during the week with another video. Not that that matters at all. But anyways, with that all being said, let's get right into today's video. So I've been getting really into Missing 411. For those of you who don't know, Missing 411 is a missing persons project created by a man by the name of David Paulides. Highly recommend looking into it. He has written, I think, 8 books on the topic. It is extremely interesting. I feel like even when I do videos about like Missing 411 cases, I just can't do them justice because they are there's so much going on in them. But anyways, I've gotten reinterested in that topic lately, and I feel like in a lot of the Missing 411 cases that David Paulides talks about, there are sightings or alleged sightings of wild men or feral people living in the national parks. Now, I haven't seen anybody really dive into this topic, but I personally think that it is so interesting, and I thought that it would make for a very interesting video, so that is what we're going to be talking about today. Back in the day when I was kind of just getting started with my YouTube channel, I did a video on a little boy by the name of Dennis Martin and his disappearance. This case is very prominent in the Missing 411 topic, especially on like Reddit and stuff. There's a whole Missing 411 forum, but I'm gonna recommend the books again because they're absolutely amazing. But anyways, I did a video on Dennis Martin, and in this case, there was a sighting of a wild man or a feral human, and that is very prominent in this case. So we're just gonna brush up on this case a little bit and then move on into the rest of the video. So Dennis Martin was a 6-year-old boy who vanished on June 14th, 1969 while in Great Smoky National Park in Tennessee while on a camping trip with his dad, his grandpa, and his brother. In short, while on this camping trip, after they had first gotten there, they kind of set up camp, and that is when they met another family who also had kids similar in age to that of Dennis and his brother. The kids decided that they wanted to play this game of like hide and go seek, and they were going to jump out and scare the adults. Now, the adults knew that the kids were planning this, but obviously as an adult, you know, when a kid is doing that, you just pretend like you don't know what's going on, and then when the kids jump out, you're gonna act scared. However, Dennis was wearing an extremely bright colored shirt, and so because of that, the older kids didn't want him to give away their hiding spot, so they hid in one side of like this bushed area, and they told Dennis to hide on the other side. Now, Dennis was hiding in plain sight, and again, his grandfather and his dad did know that this was the plan, and they planned on walking through the area where the kids were hiding. The kids were going to jump out, the adults were going to act scared, and then that was going to be that. However, when the adults walked through that area, all of the older children jumped out, but Dennis never did, and he was absolutely nowhere to be found after that. The search that was held in hopes of finding Dennis Martin was the largest search that was ever held in that national park to this day, but still, they never found the 6-year-old boy. However, what they did find, and what appears to be extremely strange and goes along with this feral people theory, is they had come across Dennis's footprints, or what was assumed to be Dennis's footprints, and they were accompanied by a very large, assumingly adult, footprint. But this footprint was like a bare footprint, so whoever was walking alongside Dennis was not wearing shoes. And this theory kind of goes along with the fact that there was another family who were in the woods at that time. They were the Key family, and Harold Key, who was the father, claimed that he had seen a wild man running through the woods after hearing a scream, and he could have sworn that this wild man had looked as if he had something thrown over his shoulder. Officials did come out after Dennis Martin's disappearance saying that they believed that he was carried off by an animal or had somehow passed away due to exposure after getting lost in the woods. However, that doesn't explain the sighting of this man running through the woods, and maybe that had no connection to Dennis Martin's case, but what about those bare footprints that were found? I also can't believe that it has been this long since Dennis Martin has gone missing, and they haven't found him or any nothing suggesting, you know, where he could have been. I feel like if he had passed away from exposure, they would have found something, and if he had been dragged off by an animal, the likelihood of them even finding like evidence that that had happened, I guess, I feel like would be more likely than just to find nothing. As I previously mentioned at the beginning of this video, I'm sure a lot of you, if not all of you, are familiar with the Missing 411 cases, the Missing 411 series, and David Paulides himself. And one of the theories that people often speculate throughout these Missing 411 cases online, especially on Reddit, is that maybe these feral people are responsible for these huge masses of disappearances that take place within national parks. Now, this along with itself doesn't even sound to me that unbelievable, but this isn't something that doesn't have any back to it. People have come out claiming that either themselves or people that they know or people in their family have been hired by the government to actually go out and hunt these people down. So that just kind of suggests that like more people than you would think actually know that there are 100% these feral people living in national parks. Dwight McCarter, who I'm sure some of you guys are familiar with, is a retired park ranger, and he was the lead investigator in several missing persons cases that take place in national parks. He also worked on the Dennis Martin case, and he even said that there are wild men living deep in the woods in these parks. In another instance, a man by the name of Mike Wooley had headed out into the Louisiana backwoods in December of 1981, where he would have a terrifying and life-changing experience. He had his deer stand set up in this area that he was very familiar with and would go to quite often. Now, he'd parked his truck just a little ways down the road, and he was now in his deer stand waiting for prey to walk by. He had been standing in there for a little while and hadn't heard anything when all of a sudden he heard what sounded like an animal crashing through the trees. He kind of got excited, hoping that something was coming through, and that is when a small doe ran directly towards Wooley's deer stand, and nestled underneath it. Now, Wooley thought that there was like a much larger, you know, deer chasing this doe. He thought maybe it was going to be its mate or whatever, so he kind of got excited. He was getting all set up and ready to shoot and hunt down this much larger deer, and so he was just waiting for it to appear while he was standing in a stand with the doe laying underneath it. But what appeared and what was chasing this doe was not a deer at all. In fact, it was unlike anything that Wooley had ever seen before. What he had seen chasing this deer was a large humanoid-like creature that was covered in thick, short hair. This creature was going straight towards the doe that again was underneath Wooley's tree stand. Now, at first it didn't appear as if this being had noticed Wooley at all. However, when it got about 20 yards away, that is when Wooley knew that this being had noticed him. Once this creature had noticed Wooley, Wooley got frightened, and so he kind of set up his rifle and was now looking at the creature through the telescope that was attached to the top of the rifle. However, Wooley said that he did not feel comfortable shooting this creature because it looked so human-like. Wooley described this creature as, again, looking extremely like a human being. He said that it had eyelashes, cheekbones, like it looked so human-like. The face appeared to be a very dark, like tan color, as if the being had been in the sun for a very long time. And again, it was covered in this like short, thick hair. Once this creature really got close to Wooley, that is when it let out this really loud lion-like growl. However, this growl was interrupted by a whistle that sounded like it was coming from somewhere up the ridge. Now, once this whistle happened, this clearly caught this creature's attention, and it turned around and whistled back in the direction that this other whistle was coming from. Wooley was kind of panicked, and at this point it had seemed that this creature's attention was caught by whatever that whistle was that was coming from up the ridge. So while the attention was on that, Wooley jumped out of his deer stand and started sprinting towards his vehicle. However, that is when this animal turned around and started to pursue him. Once Wooley reached his car and realized that this creature was still pursuing him, he set off a warning shot from his rifle and then jumped into his vehicle. Now, when he got into his vehicle, he looked into his rearview mirror, and that is when he saw a second being, just like the first one, joining the first one on the road. However, obviously, Wooley was absolutely terrified. He didn't want to stick around to see what else could happen or how many more of these things there were, and he just sped off. Now, obviously, throughout today's video, there isn't going to be too much solid proof to confirm these people's stories. However, I, again, do not think feral people living in national parks is far-fetched at all. I think that it is very likely that there are people living out there, and I think that if they'd been living out there for a long enough period of time, then yeah, they would probably be feral cannibals. I really just don't think that it's that far-fetched. But yeah, so let's move on to the next story. This next experience is more recent, as it took place on January 25th, 2020, when a TikToker by the name of Ariel, whose username on TikTok is @thepresentbeliever, posted a TikTok about an experience that she had in Big Bend National Park in Texas. I would include her video here, however, her TikTok account is on private, and I obviously do not want to be invading anybody's privacy. I personally do follow her. She has a lot of followers, and I don't know her. She just accepted my follow. So if you have TikTok, I highly recommend going and requesting to follow her so that you can see her video. But anyways, let's talk about it. This specific scenario is terrifying even if it wasn't about feral people. However, most people have the thought or the belief that this instance did have to do with feral people, and we will get into that. But anyways, this girl posted this video explaining what had happened. So her and her family were staying in Big Bend, and they had rented a cabin, and it was late at night, and they were sitting on the porch of the cabin that they were staying in when all of a sudden they heard campers screaming for their lives in the distance. Now, she said at first, like, it wasn't even like they thought that these people were playing. You could tell that something was severely wrong right off the bat. She said you could vividly hear a kid screaming for their mother. You could hear somebody yelling, "I love you." You can hear somebody yelling, "Somebody call the park ranger." Like, they were just screaming all of this terrible stuff that obviously warranted for the fact that they were in extreme danger. Obviously, as anybody would, immediately Ariel called the police as well as the park ranger station, and she did say that they had answered. However, the next day when Ariel asked the park rangers and the park employees if the family was okay, they all acted as if they had no idea what she was talking about. I personally don't live anywhere near any national parks, but a lot of people were quick to respond to Ariel's video, saying that this family was likely attacked by feral cannibals who lived within the national parks. A lot of people had come forward saying that a lot of the locals who live near these national parks are aware that there are feral people living in the national parks that are cannibalistic and will attack not only other people but animals and kids at some time. Now, there is another TikToker by the name of Coincidence Theorist, and I highly recommend you go and check out her TikTok if you have one and you're interested in this kind of stuff, because her videos are extremely interesting. However, she talks about how she lives near the Smoky Mountain National Park, which is where Dennis Martin had gone missing. She posted this original video on TikTok talking about, you know, how she was a local and she was well aware that there were cannibals living in the national parks. Now, obviously, she got extremely criticized for this video, and she did end up taking it down and made several follow-up videos kind of explaining herself. However, basically, in this first video, she says that there are feral cannibals living in Smoky Mountain National Park and probably other national parks all over the world, and that not only do the locals know about this, but so does the government, park rangers, and police. They want to keep this extremely hush-hush because they don't want people to be scared to go into the national parks, because obviously, you know, that is a large way that national parks and cities and whatnot make money. People go there camping and stuff, and obviously if you come out saying, you know, there's these feral cannibals living there, nobody's gonna want to go camping or spend time in these parks. So she said that they really try and keep it hush-hush, and that would probably be why the next day when Ariel had asked the park rangers and the park employees what had happened to the family, they just acted as if they had no clue what she was talking about.
Honest to God, I have reshot this 45 times because I want to be really, really careful, girl, but I am absolutely certain that you heard what you heard. And I can only speak for Great Smoky Mountains National Park because that's where I live. There are feral people that, like wild people, that live out in the parks, and they're cannibalistic. And usually they'll just snatch kids, like easy targets and stuff. But yeah, they've been known to attack entire families and things like that. So I'm not, it could have been other things, but federal and local government is very, very well aware of this, and they do everything they can to hide it. But like locals, like they know, we've been new. Look up.
To be honest, this next part of the video I did want to mention because I do think that it is interesting. However, there is no proof to prove this, and I don't want to talk about it too much because I don't know all of the details to this case or anything like that. However, the coincidence theorist, the TikToker that I just mentioned, was very active talking about not only feral people, but she was also talking about things like the vaccine and a lot of conspiracies, I'm going to say. And sadly, she ended up passing away in a car accident that her family members describe as being extremely suspicious. Now again, I don't really know too much about this. I just saw her sister talking about it on somebody else's TikTok, and then I saw her dad mention that she had passed away in a car accident somewhere else. So I did just want to mention it in this video because I do think when things like that happen, like, it's very, very strange, and my heart does go out to her family and anybody who knew her. Yeah, like, it is just so heartbreaking, but yeah, they said that it was under suspicious circumstances, so I wanted to mention it in this video. I also came across another YouTube channel called South Force 10. I will definitely link his videos and his channel down below. Highly, highly, highly recommend when you're done this video, go click on his channel. Some of the stuff that he posts is like mind-boggling. But anyways, he is also a local near the Smoky Mountain National Park, and he talks about how in the 40s, his uncle, who I guess was a hunter or something like that, was approached by a federal man, and he was asked to go into the national park and hunt down these feral people.
Back in the 40s, before the park ever came in here, I had a few uncles who would be approached by, let's just say, federal men, and they were paid to go out in the woods and do some hunting. Now what they hunted was, well, it was these feral men that lived on the outskirts of the park. These wild men. Now they would diversify from being unable to speak, hairy, to being able to speak a language. Some of them were inbred, long time inbred, and turned out to these people to raise.
This South Force 10 YouTube channel talks about how these feral people's intelligence varied from person to person. Some of these people could not speak, some of them spoke their own language, so the intelligence really varied. Some of them were inbred, some of them weren't. And about once a year, federal government people or federal authorities would come in and they would hire local men about once a year, and they would send them into the national parks and tell them to hunt down these cannibalistic people who were living in the national parks. He talks about how not all of the locals, but a lot of the locals knew and still know that these feral people are out there living in these national parks, and that a lot of the time they would just take things like chickens, dogs, cats, you know, pets. But sometimes they would get brave and they would take a small child. Now, obviously, a child is easy to overpower, and so that's what they would do. And he believes full-heartedly that that is exactly what happened to Dennis Martin. He said that Dennis Martin was not the first child or the last child to go missing in the Smoky Mountain National Park. However, his case did end up blowing up, and he says that he believes that it is because his family wasn't local to that area. He has two specific videos on his channel that I personally found to be more interesting than all of the others, and those are the two that I'm going to link down below for you guys. But something that I found very interesting that he mentioned in one of these videos is that his sister is much older than him, so she remembers these things a lot better because he had learned about this stuff when he was very young, because obviously his family members were a part of this like hunting these people down thing. So he said he was talking to his older sister about this before making the second video, and she had told him that, yeah, sometimes these feral people would even come into town where the people were living. And on one instance, their neighbor or somebody who lived on their street had even caught one of these feral cannibalistic people looking through their child's window. Now, he says that this wasn't the first time that this person or this thing was looking through the child's window, and so the parents were kind of prepared when they'd seen the creature approach, and so they caught it in a trap and then they'd killed it. And his sister said that she never saw the creature, but she could hear it screaming. And I don't know why, I just thought that was so interesting. Like, it kind of made my stomach turn. Like, that is so creepy.
Now, I talked to my sister since I done that last video. Kindly asked her some questions. She's a lot older than I am. And I asked her a few questions, and she told me when I called these things people, that's where I was wrong. She told me there was nothing remotely human about these things. She told me a story once when she was a little girl that the neighbors had caught one peeping in the window of their child. They had knew he had been doing it. They'd been trying to catch it for a while. She never saw it. They made her go inside, but she said that she could hear this thing screaming. And she said it was the most ungodly scream that you'd ever heard.
I don't know what it is about this topic, but lately I could just read about feral people encounters and like look into this specific topic for hours. I am so fascinated by it. I know in previous videos that I've done that were related to Missing 411, I said that I don't feel like a certain type of way about them. However, after researching feral people individually by themselves, I fully believe that these feral people that are living in national parks could very well be responsible for the disappearance of tons of people that go missing in national parks. Now, I don't know if I believe every single person that goes missing in a national park is chalked up to feral people. You know, they could be abducted by aliens or something like that. But I definitely believe that there are feral people living in national parks and that they are responsible for a lot of the disappearances that have happened in national parks. There is a subreddit that I recommend you look into if you are interested in these feral people stories. That is where I've been reading a lot of my encounter stories and whatnot. I didn't get all of them from there, but the next one that I'm going to be sharing with you I did get from Reddit. But this subreddit is called In the Hills, and there's a lot of like encounters or believed to be encounters with feral people that people do share on there. Now, the next story that I want to share with you guys is a story that I got off Reddit, and it was shared with us by a user by the name of 007 stars. The post is titled Feral Man Sighting at Mingo Falls. In May of 2019, me and my husband Jay were visiting the NC Mountains to celebrate his birthday. We had just planned to drive to go sightseeing for a couple of days, but then we decided to take a walk down the Pigeon Creek Trail at Mingo Falls. A friend had told us about the waterfall. We got there early, around 8:45, and there were no cars or people. We parked and started the walk up the long steps. When we arrived at the waterfall, we immediately saw a monster. It was a wild man. He was naked, had bushy body hair. His face was deformed and lumpy, skinny but tall, and we could see his chest. His ribs were sticking out. The bottom half of the naked body was hairier than the top half. The arms looked longer than they should have been. Odd-shaped head. My husband described him as being mangled and deformed. I said, "James, what is that up there?" As soon as I said that, we both started smelling something awful, like garbage and vomit. Ew. We stared at him for a second, and we saw the man's eyes were white and cloudy, like he had cataracts. He seemed evil and startled that we had seen him. He was just standing there. The thing was carrying an old blanket in its hands. It dragged it into the water, like a little child's blanket. We saw color in the blanket, but the blanket was wet and really dirty. We watched him a second, and then he crouched down at the top of the waterfall and disappeared into it as if he dropped down into some kind of bunker. We turned around and went back to our car and continued to look around us. We were scared. We knew it was not Bigfoot, and we know it was a man because we saw his uncircumcised genitals. The legs were wet too because all of his leg hair was wet. It was about 6'5", hairy, but we could still see his skin under the hair, saw his chest and ribs. It was just like a hairy, deformed, and mangled man. Cloudy white eyes, big hands. He had full dark facial hair, but looked like a little bald on top of his head, with long strands of hair too. We were going to check out the casino in Cherokee, NC later that day, but we decided to go home after that. We believe it was a wild man monster. M and J Manning. Now, I don't know about you guys, but if I ran into a feral man anywhere, even if I was with whoever, I would be petrified, and I probably would have got back into my car and just went home as well, especially because I would probably want to sit down and make a YouTube video about it. But that is just so crazy and so scary. Like, the encounters that people have with these feral people, I can't even imagine. Like, how do you deal with something like that? How does your brain process seeing something like that? The next and last encounter that I wanted to share with you guys today took place in 1924 in Ape Canyon, kind of near Mount St. Helen, in Washington. Now, in this specific encounter, the men who had encountered these feral beings called them Sasquatch or Bigfoot. Now, the reason that I wanted to include this specific story in today's video is because I don't necessarily know if I'm gonna come across like crazy or like if this is gonna sound really stupid. Obviously, I'm really into cryptozoology, and I think that that is a very fascinating topic. So obviously, with being into cryptozoology, I do know a decent amount about Bigfoot, and I always thought, like, even like going way back, I remember watching a Criminal Minds episode, and like there were feral people on the Criminal Minds episode. And I remember thinking like, oh my god, like I was pretty young, and I remember thinking like, that's just like Bigfoot. Now, obviously, I don't know. Basically what I'm saying is I think that feral people and Bigfoot could be one and the same. Now, I don't want to come across like, I don't want to offend anybody by saying that, but I definitely do think that there could be a link between these feral people and Bigfoot sightings. In 1924, there was a group of 5 miners who had been staying in a cabin in Ape Canyon in Washington when they said that they had an encounter with these ape men. These 5 miners, and I mean like they did mining, they were not minor like under the age of 18, they were like miners. They had been asleep when all of a sudden they described hearing this really loud ruckus outside. When they got up, that is when they noticed that there were these huge ape-like men tossing very large stones at every single side of the cabin. Once they realized how human-like but unhuman-like at the same time these creatures were, they got really worried and they started to kind of shoot at the beings. This stopped the attack, but it started up again just moments later. Apparently, these ape-like men continue to throw stones and attack the outside of this cabin all night until the sun came up. There was even an encounter that was described as one of these ape-like men had stuck their hand into the cabin and attempted to grab an axe. However, he was unsuccessful in doing so. Now, once it had seemed like this had died down, the 5 miners who were staying in the cabin, who luckily had all survived this attack, were terrified to go outside of the cabin. So they got their rifles ready and they left the cabin. And that is when they said that, you know, there was nobody really around, but they did see one of these very large ape-like men standing in the distance. They shot at him and the man kind of took off running. And that was the last that they had seen of these people, but they came home telling everybody this story. And one of them actually had written a book about their experience, which I will also have linked down below. The book is called I Fought the Ape Man of Mount St. Helen and is written by Fred Beck. Yeah, I don't know what it is about this specific topic, but lately I've just been so fascinated in it. I tried to compile all of the information that I could get in this video. However, I probably am going to continue to research this topic even after I've finished researching it for this video. So there might even be another video coming on feral people in the future because I am just so interested in it. Like, I full-heartedly believe after doing this research that there are feral cannibalistic people living in the depths of the forests in national parks. I wholeheartedly believe that. So you guys are gonna have to let me know what you think about feral people in the comments down below. You're gonna have to let me know if you think that they're living in national parks and if you think that they are responsible for the disappearance of some of the people that have gone missing in national parks. But guys, that is going to bring us to the end of today's video. I just realized I kind of look like a pumpkin, or maybe not a pumpkin, but like very Halloween-y. My fingernails are black, not that any of you care, and my shirt is orange, and it is the first day of October. But anyways, thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please give it a big thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below what you'd like to see in my future videos, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on that notification bell so that you don't miss any future videos from me. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye, guys.